This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. And this is In Church. We're up to question 293, according to ever faithful Miss Francine here. Catechism 293. Yeah. Question 293 of the Catechism on the Constitution of the United States, written by Arthur J. Stansbury, the year 1828, the same year that Webster's Dictionary came out, his Dictionary of the American English. Okay, listen to this question. Has any state the right to set up a monarchical form of government for itself? That is, a government where the supreme power is in the hands of a king. Well, if it were in the hands of a king, if you follow the definition of that word, it wouldn't be much power, because at common laws, a king is an office of limited power. Our president of the United States, our governors of each of our 50 states fill the office of what in England they call a king at common law, the executive branch of government. King, that's the old word. We call him the president. That's a Latin word. It means he presides over the executive branch. He's the presider, the president. It's a word that doesn't indicate a lot of power. It indicates administration, but not ultimate discernment. Indeed, he doesn't have ultimate discernment. He's responsible to the maker of heaven and earth. So is the governor. Well, who does the governor answer to? Well, he answers to the militia of his state. And they'll throw his carcass out of office if he gets out of line, hopefully. Same thing with the president of the United States. You know, it's clear now, if you examine the record, some of you remember Watergate. Watergate, 1972 through 1974. Yeah. Well, even beyond that, the whole thing hatched. The only time, 1974, late in the summer, I believe, I remember where I was when I heard it on the radio. I was working for an oil company. I was walking a pipeline, a few hundred miles of pipeline from from Wood River on the Mississippi River. Wood River on the Mississippi River, which is near Alton, which is just north of St. Louis. Walk clean across Illinois. Wood River is on the Illinois side. Clean across Illinois, clean across Indiana, and then into Ohio near a place called Wapakoneta, which is near Lima, headquarters of Marathon Oil Company at that time. I walked that pipeline, checking for leaks, carrying steel T-posts and signs about yay big around that said, before digging, call this number. Remember those little signs? You've seen them out in the countryside. And before digging, because it was a 22-inch mag line that carried oil from one tank farm to another, underground. I was walking that. And I discovered, while I was walking it, I discovered that there's a difference. There's a difference between monarchical, like an emperor. Really, he should say emperorship. That's imperial government. And I was 19 years old, and a imperial government and a common law kingship. So Marathon had production down in Louisiana. Still has production in near about Casper, Wyoming. Had production there where we were from, near about Terre Haute, Indiana, Kentucky. Of course, Oklahoma and Texas, no doubt. But The difference between, there's only one non-common law jurisdiction in America. That's Louisiana. Now, this guy says here, in the light of what this guy says, considering Louisiana is not a common law jurisdiction. Louisiana is a law of the city, canon civil law jurisdiction. The Code of Justinian, the French form of the Code of Justinian, is the fundamental law of Louisiana. The Code of Justinian is the code of the Roman Empire compiled by the Roman emperor of the 6th century called Justinian. Nazi Germany, that was their fundamental law. They tweaked it a little and called it the Code of Bismarck. The French took that code and tweaked it a little and called it the French Code, and then later in France Napoleon called it the Code Napoleon. So there's the German form, which is, they're all fundamentally the same, the French form. The Roman Church took that code in the 11th century and they tweaked it a little, put it to an ecclesiastic purpose, and called it, and still call it, the canon law of the Church of Rome. It's the code of the emperor. That is their Bible. That is final. And it's final in these other countries. In every country in the world, you've heard me say this, it bears repeating, every country in the world is under some form of that Code of Justinian, with the exception of the 5 major common law countries. Well, with the exception, put it this way, with the exception of England and all of her former colonies. Well, are there that many? No, but we are one of them. And so we're a common law country. But Louisiana was settled by the French-speaking people of Quebec. They wanted that French code to govern Quebec, and they got it. They have it now. And when they came down the Mississippi Valley and tried to hide in Louisiana, they wanted that code down there, and they had it down there, and they've still got it. And just because I was working for a company that had production down there, I came face to face eventually with the difference because of the rules and the law and what we could and couldn't do. But the governor of Louisiana is an exceedingly powerful office. We don't stop to consider how powerful the executive branch is in Louisiana. Why? Because they're not a common law jurisdiction. Our governors are powerful, but they can't just do anything they want. There are limits in our common law tradition. What are the limits? They're limited by the state legislature and by the courts of the state. Those 3 branches of government, the executive, the governor's office, and all of the bureaucracies under him, the legislative branch, the state legislature, and the judicial branch, all of the courts of the state, are co-equal branches. Not a one of them has ultimate power over the other one. They can actually do whatever they think is constitutional. And if the governor thinks that the courts are wrong, or the Supreme Court of the state is wrong, or even the Supreme Court of the United States, he has a duty to follow the Constitution of the United States. That's how, for example, the Supreme Court Justice of the state of Alabama was thrown out of office. He wouldn't follow the federal courts, what they told him to do. He said that's not constitutional. Do you remember the case? Whatever you think about the man personally, and I've met him, I interviewed him on the radio 10 years ago, Judge Roy Moore, he became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the state of Alabama. At his own expense, no state money involved. He had made a replica, nothing fancy, but it was made of stone, of the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments on tablets and placed as a donation. He donated this to be put in the rotunda. The way I remember, I've never been to the rotunda, but I think there was a rotunda in the building where the Supreme Court of the state of Alabama sat. Well, all the left-wing woke wackos, and woke wasn't a term back then, but they're woke, the weirdos said, you can't do that. That's a violation of the separation of church and state. Oh, really? I've been to the chamber of the Supreme Court of the United States. I've been inside there, up, going around the top of the room are embossed images. One of them is of Moses carrying the tablets of the Ten Commandments. Nobody's screaming about that. Nobody's complaining when they open the court of the United States. Every time the Supreme Court opens for business, the crier says, "Oh, yes, oh, yes." That's Norman French. "God save this honorable court," or something like that, acknowledging. State legislatures go into session with prayer. Congress of the United States has had a Christian chaplain since the beginning. They pray, they go and start with prayer. The Senate of the United States. That's on the big scale. Go to the little scale. I've been to the courthouse at Lovelock, Nevada, out in the middle of the rattlesnake pit known as Nevada. Little tiny courthouse. Outside the courthouse is a stone replica of the Ten Commandments. Why? Well, is that a violation of the separation of church and state? Let me tell you something. Let me make a point. It is impossible, as a matter of law, to separate religion from law. Law is religion. All pronouncements, all customs, all moral expressions, whether they're right or wrong, they may be one of the two, are expressions of a lawgiver. Someone or something or somebody, or some bevy of men, or some person who thinks, or people accept the idea that what he says is law. That's religion. Well, how's that religion if I believe that a legislature just can tell us what the law is? Well, who's the legislature responsible to? If the legislature is not responsible to anybody, they've assumed the position of godhood. Now, I'm not the first one to say that. Legal philosophers have been writing stuff like that for centuries, and they still do. It's just an inevitable observation if you're honest with what's going on. And that's what's going on. Like the Bible says, if you reject the true lawgiver, the maker of heaven and earth, men will go about to establish, I'm quoting Paul the Apostle, men will go about to establish, is it Paul the Apostle? It's in the New Testament. Yes, it is Paul, I believe. Go about to establish their own righteousness. If you do not accept the Bible is final, then you will assume the position of godhood, you and your friends or somebody, and you'll establish your own righteousness and say, this is final. It's inevitable. You'll fill that void. Men will do that. Oh, yeah. Well, this guy says, can any state have a king? Well, he says, no, that's not possible under the Constitution of the United States. But I disagree with him a little bit because the state of Louisiana has had that. He hasn't stopped to consider how powerful. Maybe something wasn't in his wheelhouse, but what's the requirement then under a Constitution of the United States? Here it is. Even though states can do what they want, pretty much, there's one thing our Constitution says that they got to do, and if they don't do it, the federal government, the general government in Washington, D.C., will do it for them. What's that? One thing, just one thing. Here it is. The general government in Washington, D.C., according to our Constitution, must guarantee to all 50 states, each one of them, a Republican form of government. Now, that doesn't mean that they guarantee that each state will be a republic. You've heard me say this. We aren't. Our national government is not a republic. Our state governments are not republics. But our national and state governments all have a Republican form. What does that mean? Our Supreme Court of the United States has weighed in on this more than once and have said clearly that, and they're right, just because they said it doesn't make it right, but they were right on this point. A Republican form means you have a legislative branch of government that is co equal with the executive and the judicial branch. That's what that means. There must be a legislative branch. And any state that doesn't have a legislative branch, no matter what else they may do, the Constitution, our Constitution of the United States says that the general government in Washington, D.C. guarantees that there will be a legislature seated by force if necessary. Why? Because without the legislature, in the state legislature, then that state cannot send a senator to the United States Senate. Because our Constitution, as it was originally written, requires that senators sent to the U.S. Senate, remember, every state is entitled to two, regardless of the size, entitled to two senators. And those two senators are chosen by not popular vote, but by the state legislator, legislate the state legislature, the state legislature. When Abe Lincoln and Judge Douglas were running for United States Senate in Illinois in the year 1858, how did that work? The people of the state were not going to vote on whether or not who won that election. No, the state legislature was going to decide. So what did they do? They said, let's have a series of 7 debates all around the state so that everybody will see what our positions are. And then the people that come to those debates, and in days when there weren't televisions and computers and radio and all that, people came out for those debates. And then people would put pressure on the state legislator in their district who they wanted him to vote for U.S. Senator. That's the way that our Constitution of the United States is designed. Yeah. What does that do? Why is that important? I'll tell you one reason why, among many. One reason is it puts the focus of folk in each state, it puts the focus on their state legislator as a man with the power of influence over the national government in Washington, D.C. You see what I'm saying? If the state legislature has the power to choose United States senators, that puts every person's attention on his state legislator. Well, by amendment, that was taken away. And now the senators are voted by popular vote. Amendment to the United States Constitution said we're going to have popular votes for senators. What did that do? That took focus away from your local state government. That's what it did. I mean, big time. We don't stop to consider how focused locally government in the United States was and ought to be still. If it's not local, it's not good government. You know, when I was running for U.S. Congress, and I hasten to add I didn't make it, I ran, shucks, I ran hard. I ran hard, but I didn't make it. But at that time, this was driven home to me because was Tip O'Neill was U.S. Congressman from back east, the quintessential Irishman that he was. He had a famous saying, you couldn't help but like the guy, but he was a left-wing wacko, but you couldn't help like the guy. I believe he was from Southie. Is that right? Boston, maybe. But anyway, he was Irish, and he was known for saying this: all politics is local. All politics is local. He said, for example, when you're running for office, as I did, you're running for office, and I ran, and people knew who I was. My name recognition was only second to Bill Clinton. We did the polls, we know, in my district, I mean. And people would call our office, they thought I was a man with power. People don't make the distinction. Of course, I didn't say to them, well, I'm not in office yet. I can't do that. I had people calling me, farmers calling me and saying, the geese are wiping out my corn crop. What can you do? The light is off. The street light is off in my little village here, and the street light's out above, right in front of my house. Can you fix that for me? Here I am running for United States Congress. I don't know anything about local village government and down in Podunk, whatever. They would call me and say, well, I'm having a problem with the federal government coming in and telling me what I can and can't do on my land, farming, and I can't farm my pond or clean out my ditch. Or the Army Corps of Engineers is telling me, help me. I wasn't in office. I didn't have any power. So what did I do? Well, Tip O'Neill made this point. He was right. I didn't tell them, well, you need to call for your light out in your village, you need to call the village board. You're having trouble in your county, you need to call the county board, not me. I have no jurisdiction there. It's separate sovereignty. You need to do this. One fellow, he was a shirt tail cousin. Oh yeah, shirt tail cousin, and his name was Douglas. I haven't seen him in years. Geese were eating his corn crop. He called me and said, Brent, he knew my dad. See, he was in dad's generation. He said, Brent, you got to help me. I don't know what to do. Did I tell him, no, go call somebody else? In every one of those cases, all politics is local, said Tip O'Neill. I didn't tell him to call the county board or the village board or that kind of thing. I called them myself. I called the county board. I called the village board. I tried to help him. If you're there to help people, see, Tip O'Neill had that right. Of course, the problem with Tip O'Neill was he thought the government was the answer to everything. That's left-wing politics. And then Tom DeLay, majority whip of the House, came to do a fundraiser, and he made a speech before I did, of course, introduced me, all that. He was the man with power. He was the hammer. He was the fundraiser of the Republican Party. And he said, well, Brent said this. I thought, well, what is he going to say? Brent says that the most effective health, education, and welfare institution in our country is, I thought, oh no, what's he going to say? Is the family. The most powerful, effective health, education, and welfare institution in America is the family. And Brent says what goes on in your house is more important than what goes on in the courthouse, the state house, or the White House. Then I breathed relief. I didn't know what he was going to say. I do remember saying that, but when I said it, I didn't think it was all that big a deal. It's just what I thought. But that caught on with a lot of other people at that time because he said it. You see, if you get somebody else to say what you say and quote you, well, that's helpful. Well, he did that. And I still believe that. Tip O'Neill said all politics is local. I went further. That's the Democrat. All government is local. And the more local you can make it, the better off you are. Right down to the four walls of your house. And I say that to you today is in a Christian world, God is not as interested. No, no, no. He knows hey, by the way, the devil himself knows how to destroy government. How does he do it? He does it in your house. He does it in your house. He doesn't do it in the courthouse. His focus is not the state house or the White House as much, really. Oh, there's things he does, but in your house. What does he do? Well, the Bible makes it clear what he does in your house. The Israelites came out of Egypt. 603,548 militiamen, not girls, boys, not girls, no females, just males. 603,548 militiamen, exactly, 20 years old and upward. God saw that they died, that he killed them, that they were wasted, as it says in the New Testament, wasted. During that 40 years, they wandered in the wilderness. Why did they wander in the wilderness 40 years? God wanted to take his time just wiping them out. Can you imagine? You're a militiaman, and all of a sudden, after 10, 15, 20 years, you begin to see a pattern. Hey, wait a minute. All the guys I was in the militia with of the 12 tribes of Israel, they're the ones that are dying out here in the wilderness. And as the New Testament says, their carcasses are being wasted. They're dying, and we're just burying them out here in the wilderness. And I'm a militiaman that came out of Egypt. Am I next? And then pretty soon, 50, 75% of that 603,548 men, this is the Bible's record. 75% of them are dead. And then 80, 85, 90, 95, and you're still alive. And and by this time you say, wait a minute, I see the pattern. My day is coming quick. When God takes life, he often does it systematically so that everyone can see the pattern. He's not messing around, friends. Well, why do I say your house? And Miss Francine, if you have a song ready, I'll stop here in a minute. Because what was going on and the reason those militiamen, God killed them, right down to a man. We know exactly how many. There were only two militiamen. It was 603,550, but there were two militiamen that didn't engage in that evil. What is that evil? Listen to me. They didn't live in houses, they lived in tents. They had tents because they were wandering nomadically before they entered the promised land. What happened? They were 8 days' walk from Egypt to the promised land. They got on the edge of getting there, and God said, go in and take it, it's yours. What happened? The Bible says they begin to whisper, to murmur, to gossip, to down talk God in their, it says, tents. That destroyed them. It wasn't they were having a rabble rouse and a big convention and having speakers and a riot and no, whispering. It says the New Testament in the book of Jude says they were muttering, whispering, discontent. Oh, God help us. Discontent. And it was just going from tent to tent, tale bearing, gossip, negative talk. Destroyed the whole nation. Every militiaman was dead. And during that 40 years, a whole new crop of militiamen were born. And by the time they entered the promised land, they had a whole new crop of militiamen, almost the same number, by the way, because they took a census again of the militiamen. It was almost 603,000. It was over 600,000. A new crop that had not been the murmurers and the complainers. And believe me, don't you think the evidence is clear by one step inference that those new militiamen saw what happened to those old militiamen and whoa, Nelly. They saw what the problem was and they didn't engage in it. And the book of Numbers records a lot of what happened in the wilderness. And what do you see? I mean, as soon as they got out of Egypt, just over and over and over, they were moaning, complaining, gossiping, bitching quietly in their tents, in their homes. What goes on in your house is by far and away, according to God that made us, far and away more important than what goes on in the courthouse, the state house, or the White House. I repeat what I said when I was running. I canned that one after Tom DeLay brought it the forefront, and they quoted him, of course, in the newspaper the next day. Back then, people read newspapers. They don't today. They quoted him. And I learned the power of the spoken word a little bit too. Say the right thing, not the wrong thing. You may think you're nobody special. You may think nobody's listening to you. I was a nobody, and nobody was listening to me. I couldn't get the newspapers they didn't want to hear from me. They didn't want to give me any press. They didn't want anybody to know about me. And I was saying those things, and I was discouraged. He who never quotes is never quoted. Tom DeLay quoted me on something I didn't think anybody heard or ever would hear. He quoted me, and then he was quoted in the newspaper. I didn't get the credit at that point, except he said that, but he got the credit. He was already famous nationwide. So what I'm saying is, friends, you just say what's right, and it will dispel. God will use it. It will dispel everything that's wrong. I could tell you a lot of stories from the Bible about people who we don't even know their names, but the Bible records they said something, and it changed the world. Words are that powerful. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com.